In today's live lesson, we're going to be taking a look at Silent Night, broken down playing in 3 different ukulele tunings. We're going to be covering some low G ukulele, high G ukulele, and baritone. And we're going to talk about why you might want to play a chord melody arrangement in each of these tunings to get different strengths and sometimes weaknesses from each tuning. We're going to start by just learning the very basic melody. And I'm going to just grab my standard high G. I'm typically a high G player, but you'll notice all 3 are going to be pretty equally represented here. But let's go ahead and learn just how to play this very basic melody of Silent Night. So I'm going to bring the camera down. Now, it sounds something like this. We're just working on the first 8 bars. Really straightforward and simple. Nice, right? Sounds totally fine. So let's go ahead and learn this real quick. It's really, really simple. We're going to start with the 3rd fret on the E string. We're going to play that. Then open on the A, 3 on the E again, and then take that finger off for open on the E. What finger you use for that 3 on the E doesn't really matter right now. We're just going to play that, and then open on the A, 3 on the E again, then open on the E. And it does that twice. Again. And then as we go on the next part here, we're going to play 5 on the A string. We're going to play that a second time. And then 2 on the A. Now I like to use the pinky here with that 5 so that I can use my index for this 2. After I've played that, I'm then going to play 3 on the A string. I'm going to play that twice. I do like to use my ring finger here. I know that seems kind of weird, but the reason is after I played that twice, I then play the 3 on the E and I can use my middle finger here. There are a lot of correct ways to play this little line. That's just the way I like to play it. And make sure you've downloaded the PDF that shows how to play all of this as you follow along, because it'll make it a little bit easier when we talk about the different tunings. So that's the simple melody of Silent Night. It's not that complex, but it's also not that rich because I'm just playing the individual melody notes. Bringing the camera back up for a moment. I don't sing, so I like to play a chord melody style, and chord melody style is when you weave the chords of a tune along with the melody to create a full solo instrumental type of sound. And in this case, we're going to be taking a look at how to do that with low G ukulele, high G ukulele, and baritone ukulele to sort of showcase some of the strengths of them. Now, I'm going to switch from the high G to low G now, and the reason is I wanted to start with the low G for a couple of reasons. One is I think most players have a low G. I think it's more common than high G, and that's a topic for another day. But it sounds wonderful. Low G ukulele gives you a lot of depth, a lot of range. And when we work on our first layer of Silent Night, what we're looking for is bringing out that depth and that range by selecting different versions of the chords based on where the melody is played. So let me explain. Bring the camera back down. If our first melodic note we're playing is this 3 on the E string, it's a G note, but if you look at the tab, the chord that's played is a C chord. Now, a C chord's played like this, typically on our ukulele, right? Well, I don't have that G note in this C chord. I could just kind of chop it up and play just this, and that works, but what I want to do is use the strength of the low G ukulele. So I'm going to go to a different version of a C chord. You've probably played this one before, more than likely. You might have also played this one before. 5, 4, 3, 3, with our index finger here barred across the 3rd fret of the E and the A strings. The reason why I'm gravitating towards this sort of second position of C chord is because if I strum my G, C, and E strings and stop on the A, I get that melody note of the G. Is that nice? And then the next melody note's the A. Well, hey, let's make this easier. Let's not do a bar here with the index. Let's just leave the A string open. Hey, how nice is that? And now we're getting that low G. That's really nice, because if I do this with a high G, that low C note isn't going to be low. It's going to be high. It's going to dwarf the melody, so it's a great way to get a different sound. I'm going to play open on the A, 3 on the E again, and then when I go to my open E string, I want to use a different chord because it's got 3 on the E. And guess what? This C chord here works great, and I'm just going to strum stopping before I play this 3 on the A. So the melody looks now like this. Again. So what I've done with the low G is I've selected versions of the chords that have those melody notes within them, and that creates a nice movement with the bass line being my G string here, moving between these different shapes. One more time, those first 4 bars. Let's go in the next set of 4 bars. We're going to go to a G7. Now you probably know G7 like this, but the melody note is this 5 on the A string. If you look in a chord book, you can find a G7 chord that has that 5 on the A string. It's a little dicey. It looks like this. But this is the strength of the low G. Using things like 4-finger chords allow you to play this bass line, these notes on the G and the C strings in different ways. When I'm playing low G, I tend to try to use more of the strings. More on that when we go to high G, using less of the strings. But this chord is played something like this. Middle finger here on the 4th fret of the G string. Index finger here on the 3rd fret of the E string. So it's kind of like an F chord just moved up, right? Ring finger goes to the 5th fret of the C string, and the pinky finger goes to the 5th fret of the A string. I find that tilting my fingers a little bit to point my fingernails kind of towards my shoulder really helps facilitate this. I'm going to strum through all 4 strings because the melody is this D note, the 5 on the A string. Sounds nice, right? I'm going to play that 5 again. And then I'm going to play the 2 on the A, right, for the next melody. And guess what? My normal G7 works great for that. Again, I'm just picking versions of chords that have the melody notes that we need baked into them. As I go to the 7th measure here, it goes to the C chord, right? And that C chord's going to have this C melody note. So our open C chord works wonderfully for that. And then the next melody note is the 3 on the E. So guess what? I go back to that closed C shape that I did at the start of this. The goal here is just to create movement with these chords. I know this is a lot of information, especially if you haven't worked much with this before. This can feel incredibly overwhelming. But the point here is just to showcase how the low G will pick a lot of different chord shapes that close off the fingerings to be able to use a lot of movement on the G string. And this whole 8-bar phrase, well, it sounds something like this. Isn't that nice? Again, I'm using this G string to create movement because if I were to try to play it with that G just kind of open the whole time, it might sound like this. Here, that G is just booming. Bring the camera back up for a moment. I don't like that. With a low G, I like the movement. And so I'm going to pick chord shapes that encompass the melody and movement across the fretboard to create different sounds. And that's how I would arrange it with a low G. Now let's take a look at high G. Now what's funny about this is the high G is much simpler to play. So if you were watching this and it's like, whoa, those are a lot of chord shapes. The high G is a lot easier to play, but it's a little bit more complex for how we get there. So what do I mean by that? Well, here's my high G ukulele. Bringing the camera back down. When I start this, if I play it the same way I did the low G, it would sound like this. It'd be something like... That was fine, right? There's actually nothing wrong with that. That's why we started with that particular low G version. Is it works with the high G, but it doesn't sound nearly as rich. So what we want to do is we want to bring forward the strength of the high G ukulele, which is the fact that our high G string is kind of in between the other strings in tuning. And instead of playing my melody here, I can play it here. So what am I doing there? Well, I'm playing this 3 on the E, which is a G note, on my open G. I can't do that with a low G, right? If I grab my low G again, hopefully I don't smack all these ukes together. That doesn't sound right. Because it's a lower octave. That lower octave, it doesn't work for the melody. The melody needs to be the octave that the high G is at. And this is what makes this magical, is I can let all these strings just kind of ring open, and actually it's a lot easier to play. If you look at the tab, you'll see the first 4 bars is only 0 across the ukulele, because I'm going to play my open G, and to add some harmony with it, I'm going to play my open C string with it. And then I'm going to play open on the A, open on the G, and then I'm going to play the 0 on the E, and I'm going to add some harmony with the 0 on the C as well. So all that I'm doing there is I'm adding this 0 on the C as harmony to flesh out the sound. And you hear that creates a real richness. Now the range of this is substantially less than the low G, but I would argue that this actually sounds more full than the low G, at least to my ear, because all these notes continue to ring. And that is what, to me, makes it absolutely magical. So the first 2 bars with the high G, super straightforward. Going to the next part here, when I go to the G7, I can do this. That could work. However, I like to assume a little bit of a less is more mentality when I'm doing arranging on the ukulele, especially with a high G ukulele. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this G7, which is kind of difficult to play, right? 4 fingers, a lot of movement. I'm going to leave the G string open. I'm going to actually play this chord like this, 0, 5, 3, 5. So my middle finger here on the 5th fret of the C string, index finger here on the 3rd fret of the E string, and ring finger here on the 5th fret of the A string. Strum all the way through. Now, technically speaking, this isn't a full G7. There's no B note anymore. So it is less of a sound. However, getting that open G is this nice sort of drone I really like. And look at this. The next melody, when we go to the G7, when I go back to my normal G7, don't take any of the fingers off. Just slide all of them down until you get the index to 1 and the other 2 fingers to 2. You see how they just kind of expand and shrink? That can create this really rich little opportunity for some slides. I actually can hold those fingers on to create that. And it works because of this open high G as this sort of drone between them. On the low G, that low G just booms and it doesn't quite sound as good. Now, the downside here is we don't get the same bass movement with this, but that's the trade-off, high G versus low G. After we play that, we just go to our C chord. And straightforward there, I strum through the C all the way, play the C note again on the 3 on the A. And then I'm going to pluck my G and C strings together to get that G melody note with that nice low C for harmony. Kind of neat, right? So the 4 bars of playing this with a high G ukulele sounds something like this. Pretty cool, right? Now, I'm going to show you those again. So the high G, you could just hear, has a lot of open sound, right? When I grab the low G and play it on there, it sounded something like this. Hear how much more movement there is in the chords. But those movement elements also create just a little bit of disjointedness because I'm having to switch between all these chords. It does, however, provide a lot more depth. If I play on the high G again, the high G has less range to it, right? That low G string is giving this nice bass presence. However, it's also allowing all the strings to ring out more, creating a little bit more of like that legato feel, which is just letting notes ring into each other. So the high G and low G are very different despite playing the exact same melody, just because we're leaning into the respective strengths of each of them. Now this is fun and all, but this is just 2 of the 3. And so now we need the big boy to come in, the baritone. Now, I am new at baritone ukulele. I got this baritone not even a year ago, much less than a year ago, like 6 months ago or so. I've had a ball with it, but man, is it different. Now, I want to show you something. With a baritone, you can play everything you do with a tenor and it will work. Let me show you what I mean. Bring the camera down. If I play the same arrangement that we just worked out on low G on baritone, it's going to sound like this. It's going to go. That's beautiful, isn't it? Bring the camera back up. But it's not the same. What's different? Well, I'm in a different key. When I play this on the baritone ukulele, I'm no longer playing in the key of C major, which is what we played this arrangement on our other ukuleles, right? That's in the key of C. So now when I'm playing it here on the baritone, what key am I in? Well, I'm in the key of F major. That's a little different. Oh, excuse me, I'm in G major. I'm still getting used to this whole tuning. But the point that I'm trying to make is that I'm now in a different key. I went from the key of C major to the key of G major, and that's fine, except if a whole bunch of people are singing it in one key and I'm playing it in the wrong one. So what I want to show you is how we can adapt the arrangement to the baritone to be in the same key. And that same key is going to be the key of C major, which looks something like this on the baritone. Pretty nice, right? This is in the key of C major. Now, it looks like it's the key of F major, right? Because this looks like an F chord to our tenor. That's why I mixed up the F and G earlier in this lesson. But it's in the key of C because the baritone has a different tuning than our standard high and low G ukuleles. The high and low G ukulele is G, C, E, A, but the baritone is D, G, B, E. Therefore, everything you play is in a different key. So an F chord from a traditional ukulele to a baritone is now a C chord. So this makes this arrangement, I think, the most difficult of these because we have to remap it into a key that's a little bit more challenging. And what we end up with is playing our C chord like this, 2, 0, 1, 3. Now, I think the best way to play this, if you're trying to play it on a baritone, is middle finger on the second fret of the D string, index here on the first fret of the B string, and the pinky finger here on the third fret of the E string. Then we gotta slide that pinky up to 5 and back down to 3. Ideally, you'll hold the chord on, but oof, that's a stretch. Totally fine to release and then go back to 2, 0, 1, 0 for the full C chord. And we do that again. And doing that twice creates that melodic sequence. Now, as we go on the next part, well, I use some high G type of techniques here just because I want to use the full range of the baritone. So I'm using some open strings. Even though I know that the baritone is more similar to the low G ukulele, I just wanted to really use the range of this instrument. And I place the pinky finger here on the 10th fret for my melody note and my index finger here on the 6th fret of the 2nd string. So we have 0, 0, 6, 10. That is going to create this really cool big pseudo G7 chord. Just listen to the range of that. Isn't that cool? 2-octave range. I'm going to play that, and then I'm going to play the 10 on the first string there again. And then I'm going to leave the index where it is, take the pinky off, and add the middle finger here on 7 of the E string, the first string. That big, beautiful sound. And then to wrap it up, I'm going to play my C chord right here, 5, 5, 5, 8, because my melody note right here is on 8 of the E string. Play that a second time before sliding the pinky down to 3 and re-adding that C chord we played at the beginning. So those 2 bars sound something like this, or 4 bars. And the full 4 bars sound like this. Isn't that nice? Very different, yet very much the same, right? If I play just this much, if I go... Okay, and now I do it like this. Oh man, ukulele juggling. And and then I were to do it like this, oh my gosh. You can hear they all sound the same. Bring the camera up. But a little different. And that's the magic of this, is what we're doing by playing the same arrangement on different instruments is we're leaning into the strengths and sometimes the weaknesses of the instruments to create different arrangements. If I were playing a chord melody arrangement of Silent Night on just baritone, I probably would do it in the key of G, which is the same thing as the key of C on the other two, right? I'd like that sound. But if I'm playing them together, I'm going to adapt this one to those. At the same time, though, if I primarily play a baritone and I wanted to adapt the arrangement to the other instrument, that's a potential too, right? Playing this song in the key of G is something that I can do. It's just we're going quite up there as we do that. And that's the interesting thing about all of this. Then different instruments have different sets of strengths and weaknesses, and you got to kind of adapt to whatever strength and weakness you want to adapt to. In this case, we took an arrangement of a very simple melody and mapped it on our tenor ukuleles for high G and low G, and we adapted the baritone to fit in the same mold. And that's what we came up with here. So it's a really fun exercise and one that you can work on anytime you're doing a new tune. If you're ever working on a song and it's meant for high G, well, try to look at what's being played. Where's that open G string used, if at all? You know, are you using that string to create that drone? And if so, if you adapt the song to a low G, does that drone note kind of boom? Is there a way that maybe you can move it and move the chord shape to a different position on the neck to showcase and highlight more of the range of the low G ukulele, right? Flip side of that coin, if you're playing something with a low G ukulele and it's closing all the chords every time, on a high G, is maybe there a way that you can use some more open strings, right? Use some of that drone. Might make it easier to play, and it helps stitch the tones together because you get that continuous sustain with open strings, right? And then the baritone's just a totally different animal. And what's wonderful about that is if you're playing a chord melody arrangement of a song on your tenor ukulele, but it's not the right key, well, what if you work out that same arrangement on a baritone? Maybe now it's in the right key, and that will allow you to be able to play along with other people or with singing or whatever it might need to be. So each one of these have their, again, own strengths and weaknesses, and hopefully we got to explore some of that here today with Silent Night in a way that is relevant to you on your ukulele journey so that you can start to implement it. We're going to take some questions now, see what's going on in the chat as well as the forums. We do these live lessons every second Tuesday of the month at 2 p.m. Pacific time. I know it's a weird time. My son's in school and it's just kind of the time that works for me. But if you can't make them live, you can always leave your questions in the forums and I'll be sure to answer them on these live streams here. So if you can't make it live, make sure you leave your question and I'll be sure to answer it. So let's go ahead and take a look at what questions there might be, if any. If you're watching this live, feel free in the chat to leave a comment too. Hi Ron Ball, see him here in the chat. Always great to see you. Let's see, I know that I saw at least one question in the Rock Class forum. The Bumble Bard says, such a good idea to play the same song on 3 different uke tunings, and it happens to be an actually good Christmas song, maybe one of 20 that exists. No comment there. People have their opinions on Christmas music. I won't let you know mine right now. Do you think this is something you could do with most ukulele songs without too many issues? Play the same song on all tunings? Wouldn't the main difference be the low G string, but with a high G and baritone, you could play the same placement of notes, they just be in different keys? A guitar player I know said you could also play any uke song on guitar and it works, but he may not have known about the reentrant tuning of ukes. I'm not sure if this is an issue. Thank you so much. Sorry for the convoluted questions. Oh, fantastic question. So the high G and low G ukuleles play in the exact same key. There's no difference. An F chord on a high G is an F chord on a low G. The G string being an octave higher with the high G means that you might be playing different pitches of that note, a different octave of the same note. So every note on the G string is the same note between the two. It just might be a different octave. And what that means is sometimes it can sound kind of funny. Like there's a great example here with Silent Night. When I do this, that's Silent Night. When I do the exact same thing with a low G, that's not Silent Night, but it is Silent Night, but it's not Silent Night because this is an octave too low. They're the same note. It's just too low. That's not how the melody is. However, when you're making a chord, it doesn't matter what octave of a note you use. The chord is determined by the notes in the chord, not necessarily the position they are. And that's a whole nother can of worms. But when you play a chord on a high G and a low G, they're exactly the same chord for all intents and purposes of a chord name. A C chord is a C chord on both. With a baritone, however, you can play all the same chords and they will remain the same quality of chord. What I mean by that is if you play a minor 7 flat 5 chord on a high G ukulele and you play that exact same chord on a baritone, it is still a minor 7 flat 5. It just won't have the same pitch for the name. So if I play this chord here on this ukulele, this is a B minor 7 flat 5. If I play that same chord here on my baritone ukulele, it is still a minor 7 flat 5, but now it's an F sharp minor 7 flat 5. So what I mean by that is everything does work on a baritone that works on a high G and low G because relative to one another, each string has the same interval, but the strings themselves are different for the note names. So we call all of the chords a different quality. So major chords are still major chords, it's going to be a different note name for what that major chord is. So hopefully that makes sense. Guitar is the same way. Guitar is actually tuned like a baritone ukulele. So if you're playing a baritone ukulele and you look at what you're playing and you play it on a guitar the same way, it's the same stuff. It's all going to sound exactly the same. So pretty interesting. Now, the first part of your question, though, do you think you could do this with most ukulele songs without too many issues? So I believe the better the arrangement, the less likely you are able to do this. Now, tenor and baritone ukuleles, for all intents and purposes, play the exact same fingerings, right? They'll be different keys, but they are the same thing. So a great tenor arrangement and a great baritone arrangement are, for all intents and purposes, the same thing, right? The only thing that you have to take into consideration is a baritone has a bit more stretching because the fretboard's a little bigger. But a great low G and great baritone arrangement look exactly the same. They're just technically in different keys. However, when you're playing a high G to a low G or baritone, the more you make use of the strengths of the instrument, the more it highlights the weaknesses of another one. So if I'm playing something on a high G ukulele that's meant for low G, you're going to notice it sounds much thinner than it should because I'm trying to adapt a less range instrument to the more range that we get with the low G. On the flip side of that coin, if I'm playing something for high G on a low G, that G string might boom and give me just kind of a gross, drone of this bass note that drowns out everything else, right? So the more something is tuned for the instrument, the less likely it is to work really well for an arrangement outside these two, if that makes sense. And you can see that with Silent Night to an extent. So hopefully that makes sense. I think I saw another question here in the chat. Let me see. Renee says, how do you decide when to arpeggiate rather than playing the notes in a chord simultaneously? And strumming versus plucking chords, do any of these exclusively, doing any of these exclusively can get tedious? Does your choice differ across the uke family? Fantastic question. Bit of a loaded question though too, right? There's a lot of nuance to this. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the answer is you do what you want because it sounds good to you. I know that's not the most helpful answer, but it is at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is whatever you're playing, you like the sound of. Something is correct because it sounds good. And so keep that in mind. But I find that it's best to use a little bit of variety, right? But you don't have to do a lot of variety. I think less is more. Sometimes we get so dogmatic and thinking, okay, I'm going to pick, then strum, then pick, then strum, then pick, then strum. When maybe it's something like pick, 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 strum, pick, 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 strum, strum, pick, strum, strum, strum. Sounds great. And it just takes some trial and error to try different things, see what you think for the sound, and trust your sense of, does that sound good? Because at the end of the day, if it does to you, you're doing it right. So I think that can be easy to go too far in one direction. I think when you're trying to decide on these things, finding other arrangements of songs that you could want to draw inspiration from and dissecting what they do can be really helpful. So if you're trying to make an arrangement of a song to sound like a different arrangement of a song that you quite enjoy, look at what techniques are used in there and try to accommodate the techniques accordingly, if that makes sense. It is difficult to decide exactly when to do one thing versus another, but I think, again, listen to what sounds good to you, and then less is more. Try to do less. I think oftentimes people get stuck because they try to do so many things when one little thing could be beneficial. For instance, with Silent Night, right? What sounds better? Bring the camera down. If I play something like this, all right, I'm going to play super complex Silent Night. Something like... oh my gosh, that's too much, right? Versus this. Right? You hear, I like that one more. I did a lot less the second time than I did the first time. That second time I added this little slide. I really like that sound, so I did that. How much filler did I do? Maybe a single note, maybe 2 notes, maybe 3 notes, right? But I'm not trying to do too much. So hopefully that helps a bit. At the end of the day, it always is based on experimentation, trial and error, finding the sounds that work best for you. And it is tricky for sure, but that's where arranging can become really fun. I did a Chord Melody course that we'll probably link down below that you can check out if you want more work on chord melody stuff. And there's tons of lessons here on Rock Class 101 of chord melody styles. And ultimately, the more arrangements you learn that sound like the sound that you want, the more likely you are to pick up different techniques and skills that you can use in your own arrangements moving forward. So let's see if there's any other questions in the chat on Rock Class or otherwise. Doesn't look like it. But this has been a super fun topic to talk about because each one of these instruments is a different instrument. And I think this is a little thing I want to leave you with is don't try to think of high G, low G, and baritone as the same instrument. Try to think of them as different instruments with similarities. There's a lot that you can do between each of them that does cross, over and work between each other. But there's a lot of really unique things, and trying to do the same thing on all 3 tunings kind of does a disservice to each one. Lean into the strengths, find the one that you like, and explore that. And then take some of those strengths and try it on the other uke and see what works and what doesn't. Since picking up the baritone, I've become a better high G player because I've looked for things in different ways. It's not that the techniques I learned on the baritone work on the high G, not at all. It's more that I picked up little things that I never even thought about because I had the blinders on for playing high G a certain way. And that's kind of fun. So pick up a different tuning, experiment with it, see what you can think up. Use this Silent Night to have some fun with it and see what the strengths can be with chords and open strings and all of that stuff. And I'll see you next time on the next live lesson here on Rock Class 101. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below, and have a wonderful month. See you soon.